Yes, you are on the verge of starting a European tour on several days. It's a new phase. Is it a new phase of your political fight? Is it especially because you have heard the call of a majority of Iranians who want you to overthrow the Ayatollah's regime and offer them a new way of life?
Good evening, Christian. Well, over 4 months ago, Iran experienced its Santiago moment when Mahsa Amini was murdered, which triggered the first revolution of its kind in the world of women's movement for liberty. This revolutionary stage brings us to a period of time where the world is taking more notice of it, clearly. And as such, it is very important that on ongoing travels and meetings, we bring their attention on the fact that Iranian people are fed up with this regime. They want to move beyond this regime. And therefore, the solution is to find something beyond this regime, as opposed to remaining stuck on the status quo and continue negotiating with a regime that has always been the problem itself.
I was in Tehran 44 years ago when your father, the late Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was overthrown. I have the feeling today that the Islamic regime is facing the same revolutionary symptoms which contributed to the fall of your father. Do you agree with this assessment?
Definitely. I mean, if you look at the the people on the street that for months have been chanting death to the dictator in the four corners of Iran and outside of Iran, unprecedented number of people participating in demonstrations in many different capitals around the world is proof of such solidarity that exists between our compatriots at home and those abroad, because everybody realizes that as much as time has been given to this regime to perhaps transform itself, it hasn't, and the situation in our country could not be more dire than it is today. Iranians want to have a better future. They know they have to go beyond this regime, and they hope that the international community, particularly democratic countries in the West, will be supportive of their efforts and stand on the right side of history for the first time, as opposed to keep negotiating with this regime, who has been our first jailer and oppressor.
Do you, Your Highness, do you have today the support of the US and Israel and European countries in particular, which were so gullible about the 2015 nuclear agreement?
Well, I hope that we will discover this pretty soon. What I can tell you is that the indications that we see is a change and a shift of attention, that for the first time they are beginning to think perhaps we should anticipate what could happen beyond this regime and start thinking about the alternative, which is a good sign. I have yet to determine whether they are committed to be in full support. That's what we will find out pretty soon. And I hope that will be the case, because most movement around the world where dictatorships came to an end and the people of those countries were freed could not have happened without a tacit support from the free world. I can say that about Lech Walesa in Poland. We can say that in South Africa. We can say that in many other examples. And Iran is not an exception to that. We need to have a tacit support from the outside world. There is a campaign of maximum pressure. We all know that in terms of sanctions. But there also ought to be a campaign of maximum support for the people if we really want to see an alternative take shape. This is what we're going to discuss in the next few weeks.
But, Your Highness, in such a context, will you rely upon the West, the US, Israel, to eradicate the Iran nuclear threat?
You know, I never rely on anything but the resolve and determination of our own compatriots. I've always said to the Western world and the free world, our task will become so much easier if you were actually going to help us in this task. So I hope that's the case. But again, if you look at why there is concern about the nuclear threat, it's the nature of the regime itself. Even by having an agreement with it, it doesn't change its nature. The threat is the regime itself. Once this regime is gone, everything that the West is currently concerned will also dissipate instantaneously, whether it's the nuclear threat, whether it's terrorism, whether it is financing all these cells and creating havoc in the region, providing missiles so they can target Ukrainian citizens, or Hezbollah attacking Israeli targets, and everything else that we've seen. As such, the solution is not to eliminate the threat by negotiating with this regime, the best solution is for this regime to be gone, and therefore all the threats will be gone. I think that's a win-win scenario if you come to think of it, because Iranians will be liberated and the world will be able to breathe a sigh of relief that we no longer have to deal with such a threatening regime.
But what do you offer especially to the majority of the Iranians who wants Khamenei's death and the death of the Islamic regime?
Well, precisely when they say we want an end to this regime means that we mean something different. And what is the difference that they want? They want to have a government of their own. They want to have a participatory system where they can choose the direction of the country. That self-determination, that's the definition of self-determination, where people are able to elect freely their representatives, participate in the politics of their country, when there's no limitations and absolute freedom guarantees for all the citizens. And this is exactly the kind of future that people want to be guaranteed their human rights, to have complete equality, to eliminate all sorts of discrimination, and the rule of law will prevail. A constitution that will be based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I think, is the best way to go about it. And ultimately for people to know that they will have a truly representative system. A system that has to be secular with a clear separation of religion from state, because we learned it the hard way how bitter it could be to have religious governance. We paid our dues to have learned that lesson today, and I know Iranians are very clear about what kind of a future they want to have.
I want to thank you very much, Your Highness. Wish you all the very best for your European tour, and we'll be in touch with you again for sure on I24 News. Thank you so much.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much.